Hello everyone, Juxtaposition here. Today's topic, I'm going to thread the needle and weave together a series of what I consider to be military, clandestine service, black ops, murder, homicides that were performed at the highest level, and the killers were never detained, they weren't arrested, they were never questioned, they were never charged, they never were arraigned, and they never were convicted. So there are literally thousands of such clandestine service homicides over my lifetime, and just thousands. And I'm only focusing on the California-based homicides that I'm aware of. And I'm assuming that the vast majority of homicides are not reported in national media, newspapers, radio, television, and there are no CIA fake authors out there who are writing up cover stories on behalf of most of the murders. We only know about what we know in the fake news media, which purports a simulated reality. Because look, if you're like Google, all right, and you delete content, in other words, you're actively manipulating the truth, and you're actively deleting history. You're destroying the historical record of witnesses, witness testimony, because you believe it's misinformation. But we know that the majority of content published on Google searches and on YouTube videos is gobbledygook, poppycock, and cannot be substantiated and not be corroborated. So they're most definitely in the poppycock business, and the idea that they are somehow the ministry of truth is, of course, absurd. Anyway, so you got my channel. So stay with me here. I want to grade a few of these things. So I have a lot of videos posted now, and I'm going to redo a bunch of them because the content, while excellent, the visuals aren't so great, and I have a new camera now, and somehow I think people respond better to better visuals. And I'll try to add flowcharts and diagrams and maps. The most important elements that I look for in these crimes are, stick to the facts: who, what, where, when, if we can establish when. Sometimes we can't, like in the case of William Shatner's third wife. We don't really know when she drowned. We don't really know that. We don't know the time of her death. We just know that he called police around 10:15 p.m. I believe it was a Saturday evening, when he was returning from Orange County and a dinner with his daughter, who actually is in fairly close age range to his third wife, who's at the bottom of the deep end of the swimming pool in Studio City. So it's kind of a weak alibi, generally speaking, and I don't want to use my daughter as my alibi for my dead wife at the bottom of the pool that I have filed for divorce from, indicating and stipulating no alimony to be paid, and that woman is dead in my pool. So you have motive, you have means, you do have opportunity. You could have murdered her before you went to dinner with your daughter, Bill. So you have motive, means, opportunity, and the body is found on your property in your swimming pool. So, if you were like a normal person and not Captain Kirk on Starship Enterprises, I believe you would be charged with homicide. I'm just saying, it's a good thing you're a celebrity and appeared in those Twilight episodes, because your Columbo appearances were more believable than the death of your third wife. All right, so I want to talk about murders that happened in my lifetime that caught my attention. Lately, I've been focused on the Anne Heche situation, where nobody's died. Nobody has died, including Anne Heche. It's not at all evident that Anne Heche is dead. She's missing. We all agree she's missing. We believe nothing from the media, and nothing from Harvey Levin's TMZ, and nothing from, the poppycock Daily Mail in London, where we get a little bit more morsels of the truth. You go to another country to get more facts. But we know there was no car crash. whatsoever, and there was a homeless tortoise, and there was a controlled incineration of a 70-year-old tear-down dump that appears to be military housing at 1766 Walgrove Avenue. That's all we know, and we know there's a lot of messaging in there. But what I wanted to tell you is that my numerous videos that I researched and posted regarding the Anne Heche quote-unquote fiery car crash, which seems to only happen in Hollywood television episodes where you have a fiery car crash, because there are literally thousands of car crashes that are not fiery at all. But in Hollywood, it's pretty standard that you have to have a fire and an explosion. We had that with the Anne Heche fairy tale. But what I wanted to tell you is that there are so many factors in the Anne Heche poppycock stories and false narratives and chaos and confusion, and whether she bought a red wig and whether she's running around wearing a red wig and escaped, or whether she was murdered separately because she's in a child trafficking movie, human trafficking movie coming out. That's all part of the formula, people. That's what they did with the Sharon Tate murder. That's what they did with the Victor Ohta family massacre murder. That's what they did in the Leonard Lake, Charles Ng murders. That's what they did in the David Carpenter, Mount Tam hiker killer murders. That's what they did with Zodiac killings, which were going on simultaneously to the Sharon Tate, Abigail Folger, Leno LaBianca murders. It was going on. Zodiac was first. It was second. Then it took a break for the Apollo 11 moon visit. Then we had the Sharon Tate, Abigail Folger, immediately followed up by Leno and Rosemary LaBianca murders the next day. And then we resumed with the Zodiac murders in September. And then, quick like a bunny rabbit, we had the Art Linkletter murder of his youngest daughter. Art Linkletter had 5 children, and the youngest was Diane, age 20. And she's living on the 6th floor of an apartment building, a 12-story apartment building in West Hollywood. I'll give you the address, 8787 Shoreham Drive. It's referred to as the Shoreham Towers. I believe it's the tallest apartment building in the West Hollywood area at that time. I don't know about today. I believe they've built more apartment buildings. This was 1969, and this was October 4th, 1969, at 9 a.m. in the morning on a Saturday. You go check it out. October 4th, 1969. Art Linkletter's youngest daughter, Diane, who's baking cookies in her kitchen at 9 o'clock in the morning, leaps out of her window onto the sidewalk 6 stories below and hits her head. And she doesn't die immediately, but by the time she's taken to the closest medical facility, which is USC Medical Center, she's declared dead on arrival at USC. Now that's important to know, because remember with Anne Heche, they wanted to tell you that she had extreme burns, so they needed to take her to the hospital right away. Well, that's not what they did, though, people, because the closest burn unit center is UCLA Medical Center. It's 5.5 miles away. It's close. It's very close. And they don't take her there. Instead, they take her almost to Ventura County. They take her up to the Spawn Ranch. They take her to Canoga Park, which has been renamed West Hills. It's Canoga Park. It's been Canoga Park for most of its existence, but recently they changed it to West Hills, I guess, to confuse you from thinking that that's where Charlie Manson used to live. And that's where they took her, to a acute care hospital and or the Grossman Burn Unit, which is really a cosmetic surgery center, because let's be honest, there's not that many burn accidents in Los Angeles County in close proximity to Westlake Village, Woodland Hills, Calabasas, Encino. Those are the places that would use the Grossman Burn Unit, but they would use them for tummy tucks and facelifts, cosmetic surgery procedures. And it's 27 miles away from the Anne Heche car crash. So you're taking a person that supposedly is in dire need of assistance of health care, and you're making her travel 27 miles when you could have her in a completely professional environment at UCLA, which is a very busy place. At least it was before COVID. Anyway, they didn't take her there. They took her to the furthest acute care hospital in Los Angeles County, the one that's the furthest away. Also the one where the director is looking at a $25 million lawsuit because his wife mowed over 2 little boys crossing the street the year before in 2021. His wife was involved with vehicular manslaughter of 2 little boys, and she's going to lose that case because she fled the scene. It's a hit and run. It's a hit and run with their Mercedes-Benz SUV. She killed 2 little boys with a Mercedes-Benz, and she didn't hit the brakes, and she didn't stop, and she didn't look. She fled, and she had to be arrested the next day after they figured out who it was. And that's who you took Anne Heche to? And that's who probably produced invoice for medical services? I'd like to see a copy of that invoice, Peter Grossman. I'd like to see if you would swear under an oath of perjury, that you did, in fact, treat Anne Heche. Because I bet you didn't. I'm very skeptical. I'd like to hear what you have to say. I'd like to have you stipulate that under, like you deposed and sworn and testify under the record, for the record, of your knowledge of treating any burn victims on August 5th, 2022, because I bet it was a slow day that day. It was a Friday. It's a Friday. Anyway, I want to weave together some concerns from the Sharon Tate murder and the Art Linkletter connection and West Hollywood in general, and their connections with Charlie Manson and Bernard Crowe and Edward D. Durston, and Robert Parker McDonald, who goes by the name of Bobby Jameson, and James Stephen Williams. And I'm going to tie in Winifred Chapman, who was presented to us on television as the Polanski housekeeper. Let me correct it. They didn't have a housekeeper. So you mean the Polanski family fake housekeeper for television, Winifred Chapman, who lives about as far away as you could possibly live if you were a housekeeper in Benedict Canyon. I mean, she's 17 miles away, and she doesn't own a car, and she has to take the bus. So she's looking at a 90-minute minimum commute. That's if she gets a taxi cab to take her the last, 2 miles to get up to Cielo Drive, which, it would be so much easier just to use a local housekeeper on basically what's a movie set property. Just use a professional Hollywood housekeeper. Why do you want to go get a woman who lives in the ghetto of 46th Street in downtown Los Angeles, very far away? Well, in fact, you wouldn't. But this is a scripted for television story, so nothing makes sense. Just like the Anne Heche story, nothing makes sense. But here's the deal. I'm here to tell you that the murders are very simple and very easy to understand. The cover stories, which are multiple lies, narratives, fake narratives, false narratives, conspiracy theories of what didn't happen, all designed to conceal what did happen. So I'm just going to help you. I'm going to solve the cases for you. Then we'll move on to the cover stories, since that's where all the excitement really is. The murders are actually pretty simple, and they're not that fascinating. But in grading things on a professional scale, I'm going to put the Cielo Drive murders, at the top of military grade professionalism. Now, they had the benefit of doing My Lai Massacre 18 months earlier, so I'm sure that Operation Phoenix, CIA, and NATO forces all studied the My Lai Massacre, what went wrong. Mainly what went wrong at My Lai was a helicopter pilot interfered with the mass murder of the people. It would have been about 800 people killed, but the helicopter pilot, who had a conscience and ethics, had his gunnery sergeant, or his gunnery man, aim his weapon at the bayonets, the M7 bayonet, which were attached to M16 rifles, where they're shooting and puncturing people who've been shot, mostly women and children. And he got on his microphone, public announcing system, and said that if anyone fires or discharges their weapons, he will open fire with a 50 caliber machine gun. Anyway, that stopped the My Lai massacre. Otherwise, it would have continued on for several more hours. I guess it had been going on for, around 3 hours or so. And they had killed 504, mostly women and children and pregnant women. And they used that M7 bayonet to, verify anybody that was moving afterward. And they shot pigs. Yeah, they killed pigs at My Lai. And that is part of the staging of the Cielo Drive crime scene, as is the Waverly crime scene the next day, where they wrote "Death to Pigs" on the refrigerator. So where's "Death to Pigs" in My Lai? And there was the words "Death to Pigs" written in Los Angeles County, inside the city of Los Angeles. Supposedly the Benedict Canyon is part of Beverly Hills, but that's a little ambiguous because, the Beverly Hills Police Department doesn't have a homicide unit, and they were not involved with any of these investigations. It was handled by the City of Los Angeles Police Department, who worked 4 months on that case, upon which they were shunted aside by the District Attorney Evel Younger, who brought in Aaron Stovich to be his chief prosecutor, and they decided, little bird whispered in Evel Younger's ear, that it was a unemployed, homeless hippie guy living in a jail in Independence, Inyo County, named Charlie Manson. He did it. There's no evidence to show that. There's not one shred of corroborating evidence to implicate Charlie Manson in any homicide whatsoever. But that doesn't matter because he's a scapegoat. So you sheep dip him, and then you tell mendacities, which you have your mass media to do. It's exactly what they did with Anne Heche. It's exactly what they always do. It's what they did with the Victor Ohta story. Okay, so I'm going to put the Sharon Tate, Abigail Folger, who, by the way, every person that was murdered in the Sharon Tate case worked for the CIA. Okay, so it's CIA on CIA killing, except they used military NATO soldiers to do it. And I believe that the murderers were flown in from Kiev, Belgium, from a NATO air base in Belgium. And that the murderers were soldiers for NATO, and that they came from different bases throughout continental Europe, that they didn't know each other. The killers did not know each other. And we're talking about at least 12 killers. That's 12. It's possible there might have been, I could be wrong. It could be 14. But I'm going to go with 12. It's an even dozen. They were assisted, once they arrived in Los Angeles, they would have been assisted by a surveillance team and transportation, so that these are visitors, and they're not going to drive a car. They're not going to have a California driver's license. They're going to have chauffeur services. They're going to have people getting their meals, people handling their wardrobe, taking their dirty clothes, disposing of the weapons, disposing of the clothes. Not going to be handled by the killers. The killers are going to kill. The killers are going to probably take amphetamines and maybe corticosteroids or some other drugs to keep their nerves calm, but to keep their heart rate up and focused. So I do believe the killers would be on performance-enhancing products, just like they were going to do a boxing match or play football or do a serious national-level bicycle race. They're going to be prepared, meaning doped. So the killers are going to be doped. Just like a fighter pilot's going to be doped. Or a surveillance pilot is going to be on amphetamines. I believe that the killers were flown from Kiev, Belgium to Dulles Air Force Base in Maryland, where the plane would have refueled, and then it would have continued on to Burbank and landed at the Lockheed Skunk Works facility at the Hollywood Burbank Airport. Not really sure what that name was called back then. Let's just call it the Burbank Airport. It's right by Disney Studios. It's right by Warner Brothers. It's in close proximity to Columbia Pictures and Columbia Television Studios. Studio City, William Shatner, you know, Toluca Lake, Bob Hope, NBC Peacock. It's all right there. And that's where the killers would have landed. Then they would have been put onto shuttle buses, and I believe they would have been driven up to Laurel Canyon, to Lookout Mountain, and then proceed to Waverly Avenue, to 8935 Waverly Avenue, where their vans would have been driven into an underground parking lot. Disney and Disney Studios and the United States Air Force had a 100,000 square foot 5-studio facility under the ground there at 8935, and that is where the killers for the Sharon Tate, Abigail Folger, and Leno LaBiancas would have been given their dossiers on all the murder victims, and all of the plan of attack would have been rehearsed and discussed and planned, a week in advance. I believe the killers were brought possibly 10 days before the murders. They would have been brought to Laurel Canyon. You got to remember, Disney Studios had recently moved a lot of their equipment from Lookout Mountain facility there and taken it out to Norton Air Force Base in San Bernardino, which is the site of the last Tom Hanks photograph where he allegedly purchased hamburgers and French fries for the customers, which they tried to tell us that he did that in I think July 2021, when the reality it was December 2018. That photograph was photoshopped because Tom Hanks would never be in San Bernardino in July, ever. Be 114 degrees out there in your typical July. But anyway, he was out there in December in 2018, and he did take a photograph. And then that photograph was recycled to create the illusion that he was alive and well and recovered from the coronavirus and blah, 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 blah. But he's been missing for over 2.5 years now. And he's got his Colonel Parker movie out, but he's not promoting it because he's not available. Because he's wherever Anne Heche is. He's wherever Jeffrey Epstein is. They're just disappeared. I'm not going to wait around for the media to declare Tom Hanks to be dead. All right, so he was the #1 film star. Not anymore. I don't know who is now. So the killers would have been taken to 4 houses directly below the Cielo Drive crime scene. I'm getting tired of having to tell you that the murder scene is not on Cielo, it's on Bella. But the media has spent 52 years convincing everybody that Sharon Tate, rented and resided at 10050 Cielo. That's a complete lie, totally false, not true. She never lived there. I don't think she ever spent a night there in her life. She attended parties there, like Steve McQueen did, like Peter Sellers did, like Yul Brynner did, like Henry Fonda did, like Cary Grant did, like Diane Cannon did. Everybody in Hollywood, including the producers and directors, went to parties at Cielo Drive over a 25-year period from 1945 up until August 1969. So that's 24 and a half years of parties at a porn film Hollywood set with the furniture that can be switched back and forth, with the big barn garage, with the red Ferrari that's normally parked in there but had been removed for the weekend of the murders. The red Ferrari was not there. It was missing. It belongs to the property. It doesn't belong to Roman Polanski, just like it never belonged to Mark Lindsay, the lead singer of Paul Revere and the Raiders, who had a contract with Columbia Records. And they promoted a best hits album on the property where Sharon Tate was killed. 2 years earlier, in 1967, they did a photo shoot, extensive. They do lots of photo shoots on that property, people. They did one for Michelle Morgan, that's not her real name. It's Michelle, Simone Michelle Rosell. All right, so anyway, they do lots of photo shoots there, and they did one for Sharon Tate on March 27th, it's 1969, to create the illusion that this was her love house and that she was living there. No, she's never living there. and she was going off to Rome the next day, and to go be with Orson Welles and film 13 Chairs, her last film, because see, her contract with Filmways MGM was expiring, and they couldn't book her for any more work because she won't renew her stupid contract. It's probably what got her killed. Everybody who was killed was quitting, with the maybe one exception of Voytek Frykowski. I don't have good information on whether he was quitting. My thinking is that he wouldn't be quitting. But Abigail Folger was quitting. She was a private banker for CIA. Her mother got her that job. Her mother was a big shot with the CIA in San Francisco. Her mother ran San Francisco clandestine services, which includes, you name it. You can throw Nancy Pelosi's name into that too, because Diane Feinstein, George Moscone, Willie Brown, John Burton, they all were friends with Jimmy Jones, and Jimmy Jones needed to get money. He would get it from Abigail Folger's mother. So she's running the show for Timothy Leary. She's adult supervision for Bill Graham, Timothy Leary, Ken Kesey, Hunter S. Thompson, David Smith, Roger Smith, Jim Jones, Sharon Tate's father, Paul Tate, who works for Army Intelligence. Okay? So they all need money. They all have expense reports, and they have to do what they're told. And Inés Mejia was that person. And she had State Department clearances. Her parents were ambassadors to El Salvador, which worked out perfect for her first marriage to Peter Folger, because was the number 3 importer of coffee beans in the United States. He sold the Folger Company to Procter & Gamble in 1963, so that wasn't in effect. However, he still had a licensing distribution agreement with Procter & Gamble. But Procter & Gamble took the coffee importation business from number 3 to number 1 during the 6 years that it operated Folger's coffee brand, leading up to Abigail Folger's murder, where she was murdered, 28 stab wounds from the M7, 28, in a 360-degree pattern around her body. That's how you know that this was attached to a rifle. That's how you know there was at least 3 soldiers murdering Abigail Folger. 3. If you used your hand, you'd end up stabbing your partner. So you use the rifle because you're going to nick, the bayonets are going to nick each other when you're trying to do that, and the person is fleeing, and you're encircling the person. Just trust me on this. You have to be very rehearsed and practiced to understand how to kill people in a radial pattern. And Abigail Folger and Voytek Frykowski's wounds match what I just described. That's not true with Sharon Tate and Tom Kummer or the LaBiancas. I believe they were chloroformed or tased so that they were semi-conscious. That way they're not fleeing. Because Leno LaBianca was 6 feet tall, 235 pounds, and a former military policeman, and he had 6 weapons. He had 6 pistols in the house, and he didn't use any of them, so he had to be unconscious. Otherwise, you'd never be able to pacify and control him. It's all about pacification and control when you're talking about killing people, and if you're talking about just keeping people sheltered in place and frightened to death with a fake pandemic, that's pacification and control also. It's a different type. Or getting a mandatory vaccine paperwork, that's a form of pacification and control. The same as threatening somebody with an M7 bayonet. It's the same thing. You're threatening people with this. Or if your bank tells you you need to get a digital wallet and have a social credit score, they're threatening you with a bayonet because you won't be able to buy groceries because they're giving you an ultimatum. And what I'm telling you is the most dangerous people in our society is not NATO. It's the bankers. The bankers are the most dangerous people in our society. They're the enemy of humanity. None of these murders would have ever happened without a private banker. Anyway, Abigail Folger was, and she was quitting when she realized what a fraudulent, creepy, unethical business it is. She wanted out. And so did Tom Kummer, who'd had enough of spying on people by being a surveillance barber. And Leno LaBianca and Rosemary, they were buying a horse farm down in San Diego County, which is a good 2-hour drive south. So there's no way they can perform drug dealing, money laundering for the straight Satans. The CIA drug operation that's over where Ann Heche's last visit was to the Richard Glass hair design, 4/10 of a mile from that location where Arnold Schwarzenegger used to work out, Muscle Beach, and right on the other side of the parking lot from Muscle Beach is the Straight Satan's Clubhouse, located at 1 Clubhouse Avenue, and that's where the CIA brought drugs to be distributed. And then the money that was collected was given to Leno to put into his family grocery businesses, cleanse it, and then kick it back as a vendor payment to the CIA straw companies. And it was perfect operation, and they've been doing that for years, and it was perfect. But you can see Leno at age 44 wanted to pursue his dream of racehorses and breeding and living on a ranch and getting out of Los Angeles. And bear in mind, he doesn't live in that house he was killed, just like Sharon Tate wasn't living in the house that she was killed. That's a porn set. In the case of Leno, that's his mother's house. He doesn't want to live in his mother's house. It's only 1,500 square feet. For the last 7 years, he's been living in the Walt Disney Mansion in Griffith Park at 4053 Woking Way. It's 6,188 square foot house with a tennis court. So that's what he's used to. He's used to just he and his wife in a 6,000 square foot home with a private theater to view films. That's what he's used to. Now he wants to go live on a 20-acre horse farm. So he's financially well off. You can't tell that by looking at his finances because he's in the money laundering business. His personal finances look, okay, not great, but his off the books are, he probably has several $1 million salted away off the books. What we do know is he had $500 of silver coins in his car the day after his murder, and he had valuable things throughout the house, but they were just temporarily staying at that house before they transitioned down to San Diego. So they had already sold the home basically in December 1968, and then they had to find the horse ranch, close on the deal, and then transition down there. And that was going to take most of 1969. Anyway, they were whacked. And they brought in people, professional soldiers from NATO, and then when they were done, they just went back to the houses next door to the properties. In the case of LaBianca's, they have 2 houses next door. That's a grand total of, one of the houses is 6,300 square feet. It's, I believe, 5 bedrooms and 4 full baths. So you got 4 showers there. You got 2 showers in a second house on the property next door. There's no fence line. You can come and go over to the murder scene at LaBianca at Waverly Drive. It's 3267 Waverly Drive, and then the murder scene is 3301 Waverly Drive. The numbers have been changed, so you can't exactly find that, but you could Google it. It'll come up. Over at Cielo, where Abigail Folger and Sharon Tate were killed, there's 4 houses below the hillside there at 10048 Cielo Drive. It's a 3,300 square foot doppelganger twin house, duplicate exactly like the house that Sharon Tate was killed in. So they actually could have rehearsed the murders of Sharon Tate and Tom Kummer in their staging home, because it's the same house, but it's just located 500 feet away, 150 feet below, on this terrace that's cut out. And there's a swimming pool, just like there's a swimming pool above. Then there's a pool house, just like there's a pool house above, where the 3 dogs, the 3 non-barking dogs, and William Garrickson, age 19, is staying, and none of them are harmed. They had to be chloroformed. They had to be pacified, because there's no way you can kill 5 people with M7 bayonets and discharge 22 caliber rifles 7 times, 7 rifle shots, and 104 bayonet strikes without making noise. And the pool house boy would hear that, so he had to be put to sleep. And that's no problem, because right below that pool house are 2 houses at 10100 Sunbrook Drive and 10106 Cielo Drive, where Timothy Leary lived, for crying out loud. And he's a lifetime CIA soldier in the LSD electroshock business, and getting into debates with Art Linkletter about the benefits of LSD and whether your daughter was on it or not when she went off her 6th floor apartment. So what I'm trying to tell you is that they staged in the homes below at Cielo Drive, and they staged in the house next door at Waverly Drive. Then the killers came and killed and chloroformed. Then they returned and took showers in the homes next door, changed their clothes, and were taken back to the airport, taken back to Europe, and sent back to their bases. So they're out of the picture. That's why the police had zero chance of ever solving the crime, and the police didn't need to know any of this information, and the district attorney doesn't need to know. Evel Younger, I don't think that they would tell him the truth. They would just tell him, this is who we want to frame, and everyone runs around with their head chopped off looking at suspects. And that's where you get into the cover story, because guess what? In the Anne Heche story, or in the Sharon Tate LaBianca story, there are literally hundreds of potential suspects involved with drugs, drug distribution, involved with Hollywood, involved with television in Hollywood, film in Hollywood, involved with porn, involved with clandestine service, scandalous activities. And so none of those people committed these crimes. These are military crimes, like My Lai massacre. I don't think anyone accused Charlie Manson of going into My Lai and bayoneting 504 people. But that's what they did with the Sharon Tate story. It's preposterous. Never found the murder weapons in any of these crimes, too. That's real professional. So there's no murder weapon. Now, there were weapons admitted at trial, but those were props, and they didn't look anything like the weapons actually used. You think they were gonna? You think that Aaron Stovich and Evel Younger are going to allow an N7 bayonet to be admitted in the Charlie Manson trial? No way. Because if they admitted this weapon, which was the weapon used, then that would tell the jury that it was a military bayonet attack, and then the jury might think there's reasonable doubt because maybe a military soldier did the killing, you think? So what you want to do is you put in a buck knife. So they admitted a buck knife, which is only one sharp on one edge. This is double edge. This is double edge. This is razor sharp, double edge. Carbon, steel, 22 millimeters. The buck knife's 28 millimeters. So it's going to hit ribs, and it's not going to puncture as easily because it's only sharp on one side. It's designed for cutting, not puncturing. The buck knife is not designed for puncturing ribs. This is. Anyway, very important to tell you how easy it is to go down the rabbit holes with the cover story, because it's poppycock. It has nothing to do with the facts of the case. And in the Anne Heche case, it's physically impossible for any professional race car driver to do what they're suggesting that Anne Heche did, which is to go 90 miles per hour, according to David Manpearl, jump through a stop sign, over a 6-inch crowned road, double center line, without looking for, the coast is clear, crashing onto a red painted curb with a fire hydrant, through a 30-foot hedgerow without breaking a branch, then elevating on a magic carpet up 3 feet, maintaining your momentum and crashing through all the way back to the kitchen. But according to David Manpearl, he never mentioned anything about a kitchen. He just said all the way at the east end of the house. And he had time to go climb into the car. But he said there later, then there was a fire and he had to flee. So in other words, what his testimony is that there was not a fire for like 10, 15 minutes, because he also forgot his shoes. So you see, this is the story that we have here. So the Victor Ohta situation is professional killing of Victor Ohta, age 46, his wife Virginia Ann Tobias, age 43, his son Derek, age 12, his son Taggert, aged 11, his receptionist of his ophthalmology office in Santa Cruz, Dorothy Cadwaller, 38, that's 5, the pet cat. They were all shot with .38 caliber pistols in the back of the head, except for the cat. I don't know how they killed the cat. All the cat, the kitty cat, and the 5 people, 3 adults, 2 sons, were all thrown in the swimming pool. Not too different than the William Shatner wife was put in the swimming pool. See, that really makes things more complicated for the medical examiner. In the case of the Victor Ohta trial, then the killers went and used his typewriter to type up a manifesto. put the manifesto on the windshield wiper blade of his Rolls Royce, take the keys to the Rolls Royce, reposition the Rolls Royce down at the foot of the driveway in a sideways pattern so that the fire department could not proceed up the driveway, then return to the house and set a staged arson fire to burn the house down. The house is a Frank Lloyd Wright house located at 999 North Rodeo Gulch Road. Google it, in Soquel by Santa Cruz. 999, that's right, I said 999 North Rodeo Gulch Road. And he also had two daughters. They were away at boarding school, so they were not murdered. However, his older daughter, Tara, was murdered 7 years later after she had a 2-year-old child. And if you believe it, she took sleeping pills and then went into the garage and went to sleep in her car with the engine running, and so she's dead. So that looks like a murder to me. She was only 25 years old when she committed suicide. That takes me back to West Hollywood. And while the Los Angeles Police Department are trying to investigate the Sharon Tate murders and the LaBianca murders, we get out to October. So they've been looking into it for, a month and a half. And we have Art Linkletter's daughter, Diane, getting tossed out of her 6th-floor apartment at 8787 Shoreham Towers. And her apartment faces another apartment complex, which is only like 3 stories, at 1211 North Horn Avenue. North Horn Avenue, 1211. And, all right, I'm going to call that provisional housing for the CIA. Much in the way that the properties at Cielo Drive and the properties at Waverly, it's not one house. It's a series of homes. In the case of the Sharon Tate murder scene, it's 6 homes. And I'm saying the CIA owns all 6 homes. In other words, they own the entire crime scene and the perimeter of the crime scene. If you go over to the LaBiancas, it's the same situation. They own 3 houses. Well, 4 if you can't, because actually the LaBiancas had a in-law unit in the carport. So if you want to count that or not, so then that would make 4 dwellings, and the CIA controlled all 4 of those dwellings and could surveil those properties 24/7 and put the killers into whichever home they designate for the staging home. The murder could be whichever. It's musical chairs, right? You could conduct the murder wherever you lure the victims to. So, Sharon Tate could have been killed in the pool house. She could have been killed at on Sunbrook Drive. She didn't have to be killed on where she was. But the point is that you have to pick a place to kill somebody. Anyway, the 1211 is very suspicious because there are all manner of people that live in there, including this Edward D. Durston, who gets confused a lot with David Edward Durston, who's an older man who was a vampire director, producer of film. But Edward D. Durston was a used car salesman, allegedly. That's his cover. He's a CIA agent. And he lives at 1211 Horn Avenue, which is directly across the street from the Diane Linkletter Shoreham Tower apartment. And then there's a young woman who's married, who's 31 years old. Okay, and she's his neighbor there. And this is important. Mrs. Toni Kay Monti, 31. Mrs. Toni Kay Monti. She lives in an apartment at 1211 North Horn Avenue. Anyway, she knows Diane Linkletter, who supposedly knows Abigail Folger. Ed Durston's name appears in Abigail Folger's address book, which means that she must pay him money, because that's how I think he's a CIA agent. I think he's a CIA agent because Abigail Folger is a CIA banker, and she's a paymaster like her mother. So she pays people. So if your name's in her book, it's because you're authorized to pay that person. So she must pay Edward Durston. That's the number one reason that I think he's CIA. Number 2 is his story was that he's in Diane Linkletter's kitchen at 9 o'clock in the morning, baking cookies with her on Saturday morning when she jumps out. And the sheriff's department, now this is confusing as heck, the sheriff's detectives take Ed Durston down to the sheriff's office, which is a different office than the Los Angeles Police Department. And the sheriff gives him 2 polygraph exams. They give him one at 11 o'clock p.m. Saturday night. So he's had all day to think about his story. This is extraordinary. So, 10 p.m. Edward D. Durston is polygraphed by the Los Angeles Sheriff's deputies at 10 p.m. on October 4th at 10 o'clock at night. Remember, the suicide murder happened at 9 a.m. So it's been 13 hours. And they're not satisfied with the results of that, so they ask him to come back the next day. And they bring him back at 11 a.m. on Sunday. 11 a.m. on Sunday. The Sheriff's Department administers a second polygraph test for Edward D. Durston, age 27. Wondering why he's baking cookies with Diane Linkletter. And his story changes. So I didn't want to tell you. He has like 5 different iterations of what happened and why he was in her apartment. So look, his story changes. So we don't really know what the truth is. But he admits being in the apartment, and there's witnesses that saw him coming out of the apartment because the neighbors ran up to see the apartment. And anyway, so it's not really in contested dispute that Ed Durston was in the apartment. But anyway, the sheriff cuts him loose and says they're satisfied without releasing the information results from the polygraph. So that makes him CIA. That means somebody called over and said, hey, just cut this guy loose. And he's personal friends with Art Linkletter's second son, Robert, who's, by the way, 24 years old. So you got Robert Linkletter is in this story because guess what? His eyeglasses were found next to Sharon Tate's steamer trunks, which had not been unpacked at the Cielo Drive murder scene because guess what? Sharon Tate doesn't live there. That's why they didn't unpack those. Those trunks had just arrived from Rome that morning. And they were moved into the entry hall on the hardwood floors. And they just sat there all day and up to the murder time because Sharon was going to take those trunks in her Camaro to probably 9820 Easton Drive where she's going to move in with Tom Kummer or where she's already living with Tom Kummer. Or she was going to take him to 1600 Summit Ridge Drive, about a mile away where the Patty Duke house is, where Patty Duke's never home. And she had a bedroom there. So those clothes could have ended up in one of those 2 residences. There's a third residence too, I'm not going to tell you. But she had another place down on Wilshire Boulevard, a condo down there that she also had a friend that she could stay with and had a bedroom there. So she had at least 3. Plus she could stay at the studios at Paramount. However, there is the issue of her not renewing that contract. We know she's an MGM family member and she's a CBS television member. They do have housing for you if you work for those organizations. And Sharon Tate would not ever be in dire straits for housing. It's free housing. She would not pay. It would be free housing. All right, so you also should know that Art Linkletter's son-in-law, John Zweyer, who also lives in West Hollywood, in close proximity to this address, the address being 1211 North Horn Avenue and or 8787 Shoreham Drive. Just about within a mile you have Art Linkletter's oldest daughter, who I forgot her name, and she's married to John Zweyer. And the day before the Apollo 11 mission, so that would have been like July 18th, I believe. He's 33 years old. That's right, I said 33 years old for all you Freemasons out there. 33 years old. He comes home and blows his brains out with a .38 caliber pistol, the same caliber that killed the Victor Ohta family. So there's a lot of murders that are all happening in close proximity. You have the Zodiac killings are going on. You have the Sharon Tate LaBianca murders going on. You have the Art Linkletter family murders going on. And then when we get out to October 19th, 1970, we have the Ohta family being assassinated. So that's 4 separate murder events, and I'm losing track of the number of people. I mean, it's 7 people killed with the Sharon Tate killings. It's in the Art Linkletter, you got Zweyer, you got Diane, you got her neighbor across the street, Connie, Monti, because she gets killed when she comes home from the memorial services on Wednesday, and Ed Durston he's her neighbor. And then 12 years later, Ed Durston goes on a date to Mexico with Carol Wayne, the matinee lady from Johnny Carson, and she's found drowned. So I'm not going to count that one. But Art Linkletter has his son-in-law, his youngest daughter, okay? Then he has the neighbor of his youngest daughter, Connie, Monti. That's 3. I got 7 people on the Sharon Tate, of which Art Linkletter knows at least 2. He knows Sharon Tate and he knows Tom Kummer personally. They're part of the CBS family, television family, which has 25 years invested in the television family for Columbia Broadcasting System. So they all know each other. So that's more people. That's 5 people that Art Linkletter personally knows as members of his family, television family, or members of his real family. That's 5. Plus, you got 7. And then you got the Ohta family is 5. And the Zodiac family is 5 dead, 7 injured. Or 2 injured, 5 dead. So it's 5 plus 5 is 10, plus 7, plus the Linkletter's 3. So what is that? That's 20. That's 20 dead people, not counting Carol Wayne. All murdered within 6 months. Yeah, a year. Let's call it a year. 20 people that Art Linkletter is somewhat affiliated with, or CBS Studios is affiliated with, and MGM is affiliated with. Okay, and as my final thought on the day is, guess where Sharon Tate is buried? Because she was Catholic, right? She was baptized Catholic. So she's in the Holy Cross Cemetery in Culver City, within a mile away from where she signed her deal with the devil with MGM through Filmways, which is The Eye of the Devil, a film she did for MGM Studios. And The Eye of the Devil is where she's buried, and it's called the Holy Cross Cemetery. Guess where Abigail Folger is buried? The Holy Cross Cemetery in Colma, South San Francisco. And Inez Mejia, her drug-dealing, money laundering, Haight-Ashbury private banker mother, is buried alongside her in Holy Cross Cemetery, Holy Cross Catholic Cemeteries in Colma. So that's Inez Mejia, CIA banker. She's in a Catholic Holy Cross Cemetery. Her daughter, Abigail Folger, who was a junior banker, CIA, she's in a Holy Cross Catholic Cemetery. Sharon Tate, who's CIA social engineer. Her father and mother, both CIA. She's buried in the Holy Cross Cemetery in Culver City. I'm not done yet. The Victor Ohta family, which is 4 people murdered at 999 North Gulch Rodeo. They're all buried in Holy Cross Catholic Cemetery in Santa Cruz. And then the oldest daughter, Tara, when she gets murdered 7 years later, she's buried with her parents. So that's 5 Ohta family members buried in Holy Cross Catholic Cemetery. Abigail Folger and her mother is 2. Sharon Tate is 1. 3 plus 5 is 8. I got 8 people buried in the Holy Cross Catholic cemeteries, all associated with CIA, professional military-style murders. Those murders were all military. Every single one of them. And no one has ever been arrested or convicted in those crimes. Okay? They got away. And no murder weapons were found. That's professional. Thanks for listening. Have a great day. Bye now.